Hey there, and welcome to the Confident Woman Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Brooks. Join me as I sit down and chat with co-hosts, friends, and carefully curated guests and talk about all the things that empower you to become your best and most confident self. So, let's get started. Welcome back. So today we have with us Robyn Spangler, and Robyn is a functional dietitian nutritionist. Her passion for using food and lifestyle as medicine found her after a personal battle and triumph with psoriasis. She and her team specialize in helping women address the root cause of skin struggles and believes you deserve to feel good in the skin. So we're going to be talking about all the things because when it comes to our skin, man, that's like the one garment that we wear every single day. And that's really our crux of our confidence, right? How we see ourselves, what we think of ourselves. This is going to be a healing conversation, a topical conversation, and we're going to dive into all the things to help you feel your best and most confident self. So welcome, Robyn.
I'm excited to have this chat.
So before we dive in, I would love for Robyn to share a little bit more about her story, and what got her into this works that she's doing today.
Yeah, I mean, it starts back in college. I was 20 years old and I started getting psoriasis. So I was essentially covered in spots. It looked kind of like chickenpox with the type I had, but it was uncomfortable. And I'm in the middle of college and I'm embarrassed of my skin. It's everywhere actually except my face, which I was kind of grateful for because I could hide it in many instances. But it was a 2-year battle of trying to figure this out. And I went to 3 different dermatologists. I was given lots of topicals. I was given a lot of prednisone, which is an intense steroid, to the point where they cut me off and said, you can't have this anymore. And after about 2 years, I got to a point where they were like, your only option is an immunosuppressant drug. So a shot in your leg for the rest of your life. That's the only thing you can do. And I'm a little bit stubborn. And I also like to have an understanding of why am I doing this? And I just didn't think that was my only option. So at the time, I was actually studying dietetics. I was in college to become a dietitian. And so my wheels were turning of what could possibly be the cause of this. Could food and lifestyle help? And at this point, I was in grad school, dug into the research, and I happened to be at a school that was teaching functional medicine. And I was really intrigued by this concept of inside out healing. So I took that angle and started studying and really self-experimenting on myself with healing psoriasis. And 3 months later, my skin was clear and I never needed immunosuppressants. I'm not on skin medication at all. And I manage my skin through diet and lifestyle. I'm very susceptible to skin issues. Your genetics may make you susceptible, but diet and lifestyle can really turn on or turn off those genes. And this is where there's just so much individuals can do. And that's what got me passionate about this. So our entire clientele is focused on helping individuals clear chronic skin issues.
Oh, wow. Yes. How much of us go back to our younger days, especially, puberty on, right? So it's kind of like that breakthrough, and then you're going into your young adult teen to early adult into college. And we realize how much of this is shaping us and our confidence and our esteem. How we see and perceive ourselves really shapes how we think that we're accepted into society, making friends, finding the next best career move, transition, whatever that looks like in our lives. And we can be held back by not just of our mindset, but the physical existence of what is happening to us. So I love how you've taken that approach where it's like you were told you're going to have this thing for the rest of your life. And you're like, I'll find another way. I'm determined. And I think that determination, and for those that are listening, is something that really drives us to start being our own advocate, especially into our health, into our well-being. How can we become a better version and not just rely on doctors? Because the truth is, doctors don't know everything. They know what their specialty is, but as an advocate for your own health, I think having that knowledge and doing the research yourself is going to benefit not just you, but now this is made part of your mission and the works that you do to help others as well, right?
Right. And so often when we have conversations with clients, they just want to understand why. They want an answer. They are willing to do anything. They just need an answer. And that's where the traditional conventional route doesn't always provide that, because typically they're giving you medications to trial, but that's not telling you why are my hormones off and they're causing acne? Why am I inflamed and that's causing acne? Root cause care can actually give you a deeper answer. So then when you go to make changes, you have an understanding of why am I doing this, which I think just really empowers people to actually take the actions or make any changes.
What were some of the, I guess, challenges on your own end that you had to overcome? I mean, yes, you're being told like dead end after dead end. This is going to be your life. You got to do this. You got to do that. On your own research, and you mentioned about functional medicine, what were some of the challenges that led you into, well, if I can overcome these obstacles and start testing on myself or trying these new ways, can you walk us through that journey a bit?
Yeah, well, I mean, keep in mind this was 15 years ago, so the science has changed a lot, which is a huge advantage to anyone now wanting to take action. Back then, I didn't have as much access to the testing that would have been helpful. So I truly was experimenting. Me at the time, who had the clinical experience and the lab data and all of that to put it together. That was probably the hardest part for my personal experience. But as I got into helping clients, I was a health professional who could order labs. Then now with clients, we can take the data, we can take your personal story, and then we have, a decade plus of clinical experience. I say we because I have an incredible team that also works with me and my clients, but we're able to take that burden off the client so that they can only focus on the action steps and we can help them implement and make minor changes so that it's not so overwhelming and they're not hitting all of the challenges that I had with just figuring it out of trying to understand the causes and trying to I mean, I got lucky with my experiment that it only took 3 months, but that's not the case for most people trying to kind of DIY it.
Right. And I feel like, so many of us, again, we're trial and error because you can only learn for so much. And it's like, okay, try this and come back in a month, or try this and we'll.
With medications, try
Exactly.
this topical. Okay, if spironolactone doesn't work, okay, let's try birth control. And eventually, the top that they typically will get to is Accutane or isotretinoin, and this is the cycle that clients get stuck on with experimenting just in the medical world.
Oh, yeah. You're speaking my language. I've been through all of that. So,
Yeah,
wait, how did she know?
you're like, oh, you
Yeah,
just told me my story.
that was my story. And personally, I struggled with adult acne and cysts in high school. I had clear skin. And it wasn't until my young adult era, I started breaking out and there were these cysts and boils. And I was very, very insecure. I became so much of like a recluse where I didn't want to be out in public if I didn't have to.
Yeah.
And that carried with me throughout my adulthood. And I had done all those things from what spirulactone to tretinoin to retin-A to antibiotics, like everything that you said too. And it's just finding this quest. And I think for me, my skin is much clearer now. But yes, there are hormones that play in popping up every now and then. So it's like I'll take a few pimples here and there and whatever. But how can we really tackle adult acne and treat not even just the acne, but the skin from the inside out? I'd
Yeah.
love to hear your take on that because obviously you healed from a place of psoriasis to now even into adult acne. And I'd love for you to unpack that.
Yeah, majority of our clients are adults actually, and it's very common, especially for women. I look at acne as, again, we're looking for the root causes. So I would categorize the root causes in 5 categories. We've got hormonal acne, we've got infection acne, we've got irritation acne, we've got inflammation acne, and we've got stress. So those are kind of the root cause rabbit holes that we go down. And the kicker is many people have more than one. And especially if you're severe acne, you've typically got inflammation, infection, and hormonal going on at once. Hormonal acne has subcategories. Is it insulin driven? Is it androgen driven? Is it estrogen and progesterone driven? So typing it is just one step, but this is where with our clients, we do specific labs, a lot of labs that are going to answer questions in those categories so that we can actually figure out where do we need to make changes to make the most use of your time and money so that we can get you the results in the fastest way possible, which is still typically a 6-month timeline because this is not a quick fix band-aid approach, but it is one that gets you long lasting results. So the first step is 100% getting data, personalized data that helps you figure out which of these areas, usually multiple, do we need to target? And then from there, we can go into changes. And I'm happy to talk about examples of what that could look like too.
Yes, I mean, I would love for you to share more on the changes and how we can get there. I know you had mentioned this. Most of these cases are typically 6 months.
Mm.
And I think for some people, it feels like, oh my gosh, that's so long. Like I want this overnight clear skin. But the way I see it is if you've gone all these years, 6 months feels like a week. Like I'll take that. And I remember the same case for me. It was my doctor who told me this is not an overnight win. You're not going to have clear skin even like 1 month. We're going to keep up this routine. I said, okay, I'm willing to try it because the reward was worth the wait. And I think to your point, it's not just about the external. So I'd love for you to start sharing more about those changes, how we can start implementing.
Yeah. So first, we're always going to start with just the foundational healthy habits. I mean, we can't skip over that. If you're eating garbage, that's where we start, right? I would say 90% of our clients come already eating really healthy, which is why they're frustrated. They eat primarily real food, they exercise, they don't feel like they're crazy stressed. So, foundations, decent place. Where we come in and really start to tweak things is, let's say we have someone that their labs come back and we see that their insulin is really high, which is one of those hormonal categories, and they've got inflammatory looking acne. Skin is really red or purple. And we find that they have high iron. Okay, so now we've got two categories. We've got hormonal and inflammation. And we have some reasoning as to why. We've got insulin and we've got iron overload. Now we're going to add on to that foundational healthy habits that they have and create targeted treatments to help support those. So for insulin, we're going to test their minerals. We're going to make sure that their cells are properly responding to carbs, glucose. There's a lot of interventions to support that. And that will very much vary person to person based on their lifestyle and their lab data. But we're going to use nutrition strategies. We're not typically big on food eliminations or low carb type of stuff. There's a whole bunch more you can do for cellular support. What I mean by cellular support is picture you have millions of cells in your body. Picture little grapes versus shriveled up little raisins. Most people with insulin issues have shriveled up little raisins. So we need to come in there and use nutrients to help them make those into grapes so that they improve that lab marker, which therefore reduces the signal of triggering acne. So that's one. And then if they also had iron overload, we're going to work on the nutrients to help them use iron better and possibly talk to them about doing a blood donation to get rid of the excess iron that they have. That's just one example of how we might make changes with someone based on their lab data. But my point with kind of sharing an example is that may be night and day different from what you would have needed because we don't know if you would have needed had iron issues or insulin issues. So the personalization of healing skin is really, really critical.
So, for somebody coming into your space to learn more about this, would the first step be to have a blood panel test to test those hormones?
We run labs on our clients. So if they recently had labs done, we'll absolutely take a look at that. But in the 10 years I've done this, no one has ever come with all the labs that we need. And that's because as dietitians, we're ordering things that may not be top of mind for a dermatologist. They're not looking at how your body's using copper. That's just not that's not what they're trained, which is totally fair. They're trained in medicine. And so what we're assessing, especially when it comes to nutrition, is at a much deeper level that most clients don't come with the labs they need. And so right away as a client, we order a stool test, an iodine urine test, a hair tissue mineral analysis test, and a large panel of blood labs.
Wow, you guys cover it all. I
Very
love.
comprehensive.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I know when I go to the doctor, they just do like the typical check in, check out
Yeah.
stuff. And I think that, again, going back to the beginning of this conversation about being your own advocate, having this knowledge. So now, even for me, for example, I'm like, I'm going to keep this in my knowledge bank here. And when I get to that place, I'm like, okay, let's see, did we test this, this, and this? And they might look at me like, how do you know about these things? Right. Because we have to do our own research.
But I also want people to be empowered by that because, as you know, I'm sure in the cycle with your skin, you get to a point where there's days that you're just sad about it. And it really affects people emotionally. And that's fair. I know there's the message out there about just love the skin you're in, but I have yet to meet a woman with chronic skin issues that doesn't have bad days about their skin, and that's okay. I just also want them to know that there's answers out there. If they're being told there's not, that's not true.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I was just having a bad skin day and thinking, why do I get so caught up in the skin? It's just everyone has good day, bad day. But then I started thinking about is how deeply it impacts our self-esteem and just how we carry ourselves because we know what we're struggling inside. We know the battle we've been fighting. And so I think that we can get to a place where we feel confident from the inside out. It boosts that level of confidence and esteem. And so it takes you to that next level. And it's a place where I think every woman should be empowered and have that option and have that choice. And I love what you're doing because this is so needed. Most people, they get skin issues, they go straight to the doctor, they go to the dermatologist or their primary care. And that's pretty much where it stops. And
Yeah.
I love that you guys take this to the next level and take that deep dive in, go to the blood, the stool, the iron, the hair, like the whole inside out. When you talk about the care and making those changes, making those habits, how does that impact? Now, I've heard this before that so much of our hormones and what we battle with is produced in the gut. Is
Good
that
question.
true?
I would not say that that's 100% true because a lot of our hormones are actually produced in our ovaries. But the concept of a statement like that is disease begins in the gut, or that's an area to assess, which it is absolutely an area to assess. That's why we run a stool panel on every client because so much of our immune system is started in our gut. And that is affecting how your inflammation is possibly triggering your acne. And if you have parasites, which is very much a real thing, we see parasites in people's tests all the time, or an H. pylori infection or a bad bacteria infection in the gut, you're overreacting to certain foods. All of those things are going to trigger essentially a fire in your body, which, depending on your genetics, might show up as acne. It might show up as diabetes for someone else, but genetically, for some people, it's how our body communicates and it does it through the skin. Which, if we want to look at that as a positive, I would rather my body communicate problems somehow.
Mhm.
Just being aesthetically, I guess that's just the way my body did it, as do many others. But that information is really helpful because then there's things that we can do about it if we know that there's something happening internally. Here's the thing I'll say too about that because a lot of our clients come in already having tried a lot of experiments, one of the big ones being food eliminations. And so if you Google acne and gut, you might stumble upon a blog that says, because of this, you should remove, and then it lists 10 different foods. I do not agree with that because that is actually just blaming the food versus understanding that the food has to land in a certain environment, and that environment is our gut. If that environment is not healthy, then it's going to overreact to foods that it shouldn't. The solution isn't just to remove the foods, it's to fix the environment so that you don't react to the foods. And a lot of our clients come in kind of fearful that they're going to be put on some strict elimination diet, and that is not our style. If anything, we're actually widening most of our clients' diets because once you're improving that environment, you don't have to stay away from dairy.
That totally makes sense. And also, when you read those articles, it's not a one size fits all. So it's like,
Yeah.
if you remove dairy, well, that might not bother me, but this blanketed article says remove dairy. Now, dairy, like you said, becomes the enemy.
And then there's such a negative after effect with that because if you are removing a bunch of foods, your social life, freedom to be able to go out to dinner randomly is impacted. If there's this rule book and stress that is associated with all of these dining experiences.
I never really looked at it from that perspective, but that's a great way to take that all in because it's like you do one thing, it's going to impact this area, but if you do this area, it's over here. And so, yeah, you kind of followed the breadcrumbs back to where it all began. And what you guys are doing is just incredible. I have never heard of it from this thorough of a process. And you guys are really tackling it head on. So, we talk about nutrition, hormonal health, the gut, the different testings. How then does everything all come together? Can you paint a
Yeah.
scenario because now you got the lab.
Yeah, I mean, that's where our team really takes that off of the plate because there's a lot that goes into putting it all together. The last thing we want to do is add more stress to the client of having to take that on. We want them to have an understanding of what's going on with their body and then focus on the action steps. So, what we do with that is we take all of this lab data and a 90-minute assessment where we ask a lot of questions about their skin and their history. And then we're going to present the findings in a concise way to say, here's the main things factoring into your acne. And then here is our treatment plan of what we're going to do. And that is the reason this is we ask clients for 6 months to work with them is because that plan may shift and change as the time goes on based on how their body and how their skin is responding. But honestly, especially when you're working with inflammatory acne, we typically see that start to improve even within 2 months because we're actually targeting the root causes. So, it's not I don't know if you want more of an example, but it's hard to give examples because it's so different from person to person. But typically we are talking about nutrition changes, we're talking about supplements, we're talking about possible lifestyle changes. Sometimes we're talking about reducing exercise for clients. We're often talking about mineral mocktails and using minerals in your diet. We might be talking about blood donations or addressing gut infections. It varies person to person what that might look like.
As like a overall, that's the type of treatment that you guys would suggest for your clients. And I love that you're taking that 6 months because again, nothing's overnight. And to your point, it's like once you start treating this, one area might start to peek its head out. You're like, okay, so we got to combat that. And now you're just building out that strategic roadmap to really help. And so I want to talk kind of a side tangent here. So now you've really taken all of this into your own hands, your own advocacy, building your practitioner organization and the virtual practice that you're teaching other practitioners as well. And so I want to talk a little bit about the business side of things, of how this transitioned into where you're at today.
So I've had my practice for many years, 8 years or so. And over that time period, I noticed how often I was using minerals and how often I was talking about minerals. So that's where the mineral product came from Ravi is the mineral product because I was using it all the time with clients and I wanted a cleaner product that I trusted with the right dosage. That is the biggest problem with electrolyte drinks out there is they just don't have an effective dose. So that's where that business part came from. And then a big part of my mission is to help people with chronic skin issues and help people advocate for themselves. And there's millions of people struggling. I alone in my company cannot do that. So helping other practitioners learn this skill set and learn to take this type of approach was a way to expand that ripple effect. And I felt like, I've spent this many years researching and really creating a business that worked really well for clients because of our approach. And this should be accessible to more practitioners to do that with their clients. So that's where the practitioner training program came from. It's just all really a mission to just make this information accessible to more people.
I love that. Yeah. So you've recognized it. I mean, and you are just like, okay, there's a problem. I'm going to solve it. And now I'm going to help others do the same. And that's really like the entrepreneurial spirit. So it's again, going back to your own advocacy. If you had to have a version of you to help you back then, and now you recognize like, I can't do all this on my own. I have to bring up people, not even just educating the public, but educating other practitioners.
I also didn't have a practitioner training program like I needed, the one I wanted. I pulled together so much information over years. I mean, functional nutrition was not very easy to find back then, the information. And so I was lucky to have some really incredible mentors early on in my career. And I did not think that the education for practitioners out there was very application focused. So what would happen is there's all these programs out there that you would enter and you'd get a bunch of studies, but you're like, I don't know, what am I supposed to do with this? How do I help someone? And so I really wanted to design something that the practitioner left feeling comfortable and confident in. Here's what I do with a human. Here's what I do with these labs. Here's how I actually implement this in my practice. And that is what our program focuses on is very heavily on the application side. We also include mentorship because I think that's a really big part. In your early days as a practitioner, you're always going to you're going to question everything you do. You want a second set of eyes on everything because you don't have experience. So having mentors in your corner to review a case or to give insight or to just say, hey, that's exactly right. That's what I would do. It's just really comforting when you're building your confidence, which everyone has to go through a season of not knowing what they're doing and building their confidence as a clinician.
Yeah, I agree. And having that continuous support through mentorship, through that education builds their confidence as well. But you're essentially growing as a team. You're growing in this movement to empower women, and you're teaching that from the inside out and taking that firsthand approach from being, again, treating your health from the inside out. Now, taking that concept, helping others, teaching them the inside out. So I love this ripple effect. Like what you're doing is so powerful and dynamic. It's like the ripple effect of how one human's pain point or struggle has greatly impacted the lives of many. And I say that for our listeners as well, because how many of us are limited by our own experiences or our own pain points and our struggles that we're almost afraid to speak out about that because, well, what if I get judged or rejected or whatever those fears or whatever that is. But here is an example what Robin is doing and saying, wow, this could be an embarrassing moment. Like this is a skin issue, like how I felt. I was very insecure and uncomfortable. But all these years later, you've turned that pain into your purpose. And I love this mission driven work that you and all of the others that you're leading are leaving here in this world and making that difference. So I just want to thank you for that.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, I mean, this is incredible.
I think about this sometimes because everyone's going to have hard experiences in life. And something that this phrase that I like to turn to is one day I'll tell that story because I look at psoriasis as that. I'm so grateful for it, actually, even though it was a really hard experience. The impact it's had and the purpose of it is so much greater. So now, when I'm running into challenges with inventory of our product or whatever it might be, I use the phrase one day I'll tell this story because it almost allows me to put myself in the future of having solved it and being in that headspace. I find that very helpful in the hard moments.
That's a great one. Definitely write that down to note. So one day I'll tell myself because it takes you
Tell
out
the
of that.
story. Mhm.
Right. So that, yeah, one day I'll tell the story because you're telling that to yourself. So you no longer become that victim of your own circumstances, the situations, but you're turning that into an empowering movement for yourself to now help others. Oh my goodness. This is wonderful. And so I want you to share a little bit more about Ravi, the hydration powder. Obviously, again, it came from a need of your own.
Yeah, minerals are a cannot skip, and I'm gonna be very blunt with that. You cannot skip minerals if you want true skin healing. It's unfortunately in today's world, due to stress levels, due to our food not being as nutrient dense as it once was, most humans are walking around with mineral deficiencies, and it is hard to correct it to keep up with the stress. I mean, when we are stressed, we are burning through minerals fast. I wanted a way to make minerals easy, to be quick to access, and to make it enjoyable and an easy habit. So I personally have a water bottle on my desk right now, and it's got a bunch of minerals in it. Ravi is something where it's one product. You put one scoop in there or more if you want, but it's an easy way to make sure you're getting clinically effective doses of minerals like potassium and sodium. It makes it a very easy habit because I think the estimate is 2% of the population get adequate potassium in their diet per day, which is atrocious. And we really need that, especially when we talk about skin healing. But we could say that it's truly just needed for just health in general.
Right. And so what would you say are some of the minerals that are most often overlooked?
Yeah. So the minerals that we have the most of in our body are called our macro minerals, and that would be potassium, sodium, magnesium, and calcium. And those are the ones that we're going to need to give the most attention to. When it comes to the deficiencies we see the most of, it would be potassium, magnesium. We could throw sodium in there, honestly, because the health minded individual tends to actually get not enough sodium because they're not eating a bunch of junk. But we also see a lot of iodine, low iodine with clients, which is one reason we test that.
Mm.
And then zinc is another big one. Now, if you're listening to this, please do not just go buy a bunch of those supplements because the problem is if you overcorrect on one or you kind of don't know the balance, then that's not what we want. Now, if you're doing it just food sources, great. You're not going to do yourself any harm by doing food sources, which is what Ravi is. It's primarily food based. So that is not a problem with being concerned of throwing something off balance.
Makes sense. And so what foods per se would help? I mean, if we can eat our minerals, right?
Yeah, that's the goal.
What's exactly, right? Like
Yeah.
eat whole, real healthy foods because that's where we
Yep.
get our resources and our nutrition from. But the
Yep.
reality is we can't consume all of that in like a day, even
Yeah,
like
you're
the
right.
amount. So what typical foods? I mean, our standard American diet, like eating whole,
Yeah.
healthy, real foods. What are options that are available?
So I'll do a couple things here. First, I have a full guide that goes over food sources at theclearskinlab.com/minerals. So we can make sure everyone gets that link. But I'm going to make it really simple and say focus on roots and fruits. Root veggies and fruits are very rich sources of a lot of minerals, especially potassium. And if you're looking at your plate day to day, are there opportunities to swap something or just make sure you have a little bit of kiwi or berries or something where you're giving intention to fruits or root veggies, which is like squashes, potatoes. I love myself some potatoes, and hey, they're dense in minerals. Carrots, beets, turnips, a whole variety of root veggies. Those are going to be it's a really easy phrase to remember to prioritize roots or fruits on your plate. Animal protein is another really great way to get minerals. They're especially when we look at like red meats are great for zinc and very bioavailable, meaning the gut is can easily absorb them. But I have a full detailed list. I just don't want people to be thinking I've got to get this many bananas and this many potatoes. That just takes out the fun of food and it doesn't have to be that complicated. So that's why I like phrases like roots and fruits or something that make it simple that if you're doing these things, you're doing a great job. And if you can add in a mineral mocktail once or twice a day, cherry on top.
That totally makes sense too, because it's like, I remember early on in my nutrition days learning so much about the nutrition side of it. When I came out of this place of self loathing, body dysmorphia, eating disorders, disordered eating, I was just like, I don't even know what to eat, how to eat. And I had to throw myself into the deep end to figure this out on my own. Those meal plans and everything else that's kind of taught in the health and wellness lifestyle really wasn't conducive. And so I had to take that approach of understanding what nutrition was. And the way I looked at it, because our culture is very diet driven,
Yeah.
where diet is just the foods and beverages you consume. That's it.
Mhm.
Nutrition is the nutritional value of the foods that you consume. And so when I took that approach, I started looking at now the foods. I'm like, okay, we have the macronutrients and we have our micronutrients. And so when I looked at the hierarchy of food and nutrition, and for those that are like, oh my gosh, why is she going all sciencey here? It's because I kind of had to on my own to heal my own journey with that. But it comes from like your calories to your macronutrition to your micronutrition to your food timing. And then at the very top of that pyramid is supplements. I don't want somebody to go think, oh, I could just go get the supplements and forego eating the whole real foods. The supplements are there exactly to supplement your diet. So if you're crushing it and you love the foods and the nutrition that you're eating, but you're still feeling like something's lagging in there, and maybe taking a supplement such as the Ravi and getting those extra minerals, that can really do wonders. And so I would love for like anyone that is listening to this, if you're like, man, that's what I'm doing, or I got to check out Ravi because this is going to be a game changer in my life, please do so. But I wanted to throw that in there. So not to think, go scrap the food, go get the supplements, and think that you're going to get the results that you're looking for.
We always say supplements are supplemental to a good foundation, but that is a huge misconception is that you can just go silver bullet your way with products through healing because it doesn't actually address the root cause. If you're needing supplements, why? Why are you deficient? Those are questions that also need to be asked.
This is you have poured a wealth of information here. I got a whole journal full of notes here. So good. To those that are listening, go back and take another listen to this episode and start identifying some of those key areas in your life that maybe this episode has shined a light on, that Robyn has talked about, from the skin to our stressors to the inflammation. And we might not realize what is actually happening. And it could be something about our gut, right? Maybe our daily movements have changed. Maybe our skin is flaring up. Maybe we're just feeling lethargic and something doesn't feel right. A lot of this is what Robyn is saying. It all happens internally. And for Robyn's story, and much like my own, what was happening internally came through in our skin. That was our body's alarm system say, hey, listen, something's not right. And I think that the more in tune we are with our body, with how what we put into it and how it's producing on the outside, what is the fruits of what we're producing? Is it good fruit or is it bad fruit? Then we have to start checking and being an advocate and going down that path. So yes, maybe it might start with your primary care. Maybe it might start with your dermatologist. But as Robyn's saying, there's so much more beyond what they are able to do that's why taking that extra next best step and going that distance to really, again, be your advocate. I probably says a million times in this episode, but I can't stress that enough because there's so much that we can do on our side to overcome and heal from within. And so, Robyn, I'd love for you to share anything that we haven't already talked about on today's episode that you feel is very important to this conversation as well.
Yeah, I would just end on that. If anyone, this has resonated and you feel like you want more information or you want even a deeper understanding of this process, I have a ton of free resources on theclearskinlab.com. We have a full free course that just explains this approach. And so if you're feeling stuck with your skin and you want, a deeper understanding, that is the place to go. I also have a ton of free information on my Instagram. I hope you take this episode and let it light a fire under you, that there's a lot of opportunity in front of you and you have a lot of say in the direction of your health.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. And so again, let's share the website and best ways if there's a social platform to connect with you as well.
Yeah, so theclearskinlab.com has everything we do and all of our free resources on it. And then my social media is at nutritionbyrobyn.com or at nutritionbyrobyn. That is Robyn with a Y.
Awesome. So of course, all that will be in the show notes below. So be sure to give Robyn a follow. And if this episode resonates, be sure to go check out the links. There's so much free content that she's putting out here because if you can't already tell in today's episode, she is passionate about this work, passionate about changing lives, and passionate about empowering women to become their best and most confident selves. So thank you, Robyn, for being our incredible guest today.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Hey there. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the Confident Woman Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode as much as I did, please be sure to like, subscribe, and leave us a review. Thanks again for listening.